While there have been plenty of legendary crime bosses in history, most people would agree that none are more infamous than those who made up the Mafia. These men lived in a time where the law was barely present, and they used that to build criminal empires that seemed untouchable. But what really made them so powerful? And are there any who managed to survive into modern times? Welcome back, everybody, to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Real Godfathers, how the Mafia built an empire of crime. Let's get into it. To understand how these groups were able to gain such power, we first need to take a look at how they started. The Mafia is a word that has become synonymous with organized crime. But did you know that it actually originated in Italy and is a term that means more like bold ones? There is some dispute about the exact origins of the word, but most historians agree that this is how it started. It all began in the early 1800s when two kingdoms were fighting for control of Sicily, the Kingdom of Naples and the Kingdom of Sardinia. The two sent out agents to try to gather support from the island's population, and the ones who took them up on their offers were labeled Il Mafiosos. This wasn't a particularly noble title either. Those who accepted these shady job offers were often labeled as men without honor. But this is just where the story begins. By the mid-19th century, Sicily had become a place plagued by violence. Bandits and gangs ran rampant over the land, terrorizing the populace. In order to combat this growing problem, government offered the criminals three options: joining the police force, military service, or amnesty. Some chose to serve their country, while others simply chose to lay down their arms. But there were still quite a few who refused and continued their life of crime. These outlaws then joined forces and created a secret society with the goal of overthrowing the government and establishing themselves as the rulers of Sicily. Now, for some reason, this didn't really work. So they did the only logical thing left and resorted to extortion and kidnapping. In order to protect themselves against rival gangs and the police, they formed a secret organization within the group whose sole purpose was to keep tabs on everyone in their territory. They infiltrated every aspect of Sicilian society, creating an intelligence network that was unmatched at the time. They kept careful records of everyone and everything that went on in the region, and used that knowledge to build their fortune. This is what eventually grew into what we know today as the Mafia. While this might sound like a pretty great idea, it also came with one major downside. Since the members of the organization knew so much about everyone else, it created a lot of opportunities for internal conflicts. The Mafia's structure is much like other secret societies, highly regimented and secretive. Members are expected to remain loyal above all else, and secrecy is the key to survival. Unlike many other criminal organizations today, the Mafia does not have a central authority overseeing it. Instead, it's broken up into 5 families who operate independently of one another. Each family is run autonomously and only answers to itself. This means that if one family wants to make a move against another, they can do so whenever they want. But there is one rule that no member of the Mafia can ever break. If you're caught working with the authorities, you're automatically kicked out of the organization and given the option of either joining the police or dying. And even if you choose to cooperate, don't expect the other families to show any mercy. But that doesn't mean that the Mafia hasn't grown since its inception. In fact, it's grown massively. As the years went on, the Mafia expanded outside of Italy, moving to the United States in the early 1900s, where they quickly got to work building their criminal empire. But they weren't alone. At the same time, 2 other secret societies were making their way across the ocean. These groups were called the Triads and the Yakuza, and they both shared one goal with the Mafia: controlling the massive amounts of money being spent on the illegal drug trade. This led to a partnership between the 3 crime groups, and together they became incredibly powerful. It's said that this alliance made them virtually untouchable, and it's hard to argue against that statement. To this day, very little is known about these groups, and even less about the secrets they share. One of the most interesting things about these organizations is that they are almost impossible to get rid of. Law enforcement agencies have tried for years to shut them down, but they always seem to find a way to stick around. This is largely because of the way that they conduct their business. You see, most criminal organizations will leave behind a paper trail in order to cover their tracks, whether it's fingerprints, footprints, or DNA. There's almost always something left behind that can lead investigators to the perpetrators, but not the Mafia. They are careful to cover their tracks. and if that fails, they are prepared to lie low until the heat has died down. This can make investigations extremely difficult since witnesses might not remember what they saw or suspects might have vanished entirely. If you think that finally putting an end to these groups might just be a matter of throwing enough resources at the problem, then you'd be wrong. These organizations are incredibly adept at hiding things, and it's not just their criminal activities that they keep secret. In fact, it's hard to find out anything about them at all unless you are already part of the organization. They are careful to keep their private lives completely separate from their criminal activities and rarely speak to anyone outside of their circle. This makes it nearly impossible for law enforcement to gather intel on them or their families. So if you think about going the informant route, sorry to break it to you, you're probably not going to get far with that either. But it's not just their paranoia that keeps them safe, it's also the amount of corruption that surrounds them. In order to maintain their secrecy, each family will have a few members who specialize in gathering intel on law enforcement, politicians, and anyone else who might be a threat to the family. They use this knowledge to blackmail anyone who could potentially be an obstacle and keep them on their side. This means that they have friends in high places and are able to stay one step ahead of the authorities at all times. And while we've mostly focused on the mafia here, it's important to note that the other crime families operate in a similar manner. The triads and the yakuza are both just as secretive and just as powerful as the mafia. They, too, have infiltrated every aspect of their respective countries and are virtually impossible to get rid of. Now, let's return to the mafia. As far as the American public knows, there are 5 main families left in the United States. These are the Bonanno crime family, the Colombo crime family, the Gambino crime family, the Genovese crime family, and the Lucchese crime family. Each of these families is run by a boss, a capo, a consigliere, a treasurer, and several captains. The boss is the leader of the family and answers directly to himself. He is the ultimate authority, and his word is law. Under him is the capo, who is responsible for carrying out the boss's orders. He is the second in command, and is often the one who makes the big decisions when the boss is unavailable. Under him is the consigliere, who acts as the advisor to the boss. He is usually the smartest member of the family, and is responsible for coming up with strategies and plans. Under him is the treasurer, who is responsible for keeping track of the family's finances. He is a very important member of the family, and is often the one who gets the ball rolling on new schemes. Finally, under all of them are the captains, who are the leaders of the various crews within the family. They carry out the orders of the capo and report directly to him. Each family operates independently of the others, but they do work together on occasion. They are constantly vying for power and money, and there is a lot of competition between them. However, they do know when it's in their best interest to work together. When that happens, they form an alliance called the Commission. The Commission is made up of one representative from each family, and they meet together to discuss matters of mutual concern. This could include things like how to divide up territory or how to deal with a common enemy. The Commission is a very powerful entity and should not be messed with. But despite their power, there have been attempts to bring them down. The FBI has been after the mafia for decades and has made significant progress in breaking up their organizations. However, they are still around and still operating. In fact, they are more active than ever. With the war on drugs raging, there is a lot of money to be made, and the mafia is not going to pass up on that opportunity. They are heavily involved in the drug trade and are using their vast networks to move drugs across borders. They are also involved in other criminal activities such as gambling, extortion, and murder. Despite all the efforts that have been made to bring them down, the mafia is still a powerful force to be reckoned with. They are smart, organized, and ruthless, and they are not afraid to use violence to get what they want. Thanks for watching. Do you think the mafia will ever be stopped? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you like this video, be sure to check out my other content. See you next time.